Hello, welcome to the fourth concert for the Bellingham Festival of Music, featuring guest conductor Joshua Weilerstein and soloist Alexi Kenny. My name is Erika Block. I'm the executive director of the Bellingham Festival of Music, and with me to chat about the repertoire for this evening's concert is Victor Costanzi, who is chair-elect of the board of directors and a 20-year veteran of the festival orchestra. Welcome.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Tell me a little bit about the works tonight for the concert, especially the Klein.
That's a difficult story to tell, and it's a very moving one. He was born in the early 1900s within a Jewish Moravian family. And he showed a talent at a very young age for music. And so he got piano lessons, then studied composition, and he got so advanced that he was actually touring as a pianist. And then the Nazis came into Czechoslovakia at that time. And Jews and Jewish music was not allowed. Mm-hmm. He continued touring for a while under an alias.
Wow. That's cool.
But then he got found out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they set up a concentration camp in Terezin. And this was a propaganda camp full of some very fine musicians, because there was a man there who taught the Verdi Requiem to the camp.
Wow.
By rote.
Wow.
On an upright piano. Okay?
Unbelievable.
And Klein was one of the people there. They used this camp in terms of propaganda, saying, well, when they would collect a whole new group of Jewish kids who were still fairly healthy, then they'd put them out on the lawn, say, look, see, they're having this nice time, and everything.
It's all going well.
It's all going well. We're not doing anything wrong here. And they encouraged performance at this one place, the arts, at Terezin.
Wow.
So he was there, and he was in charge of the cultural activities, one of several. They moved him to Auschwitz. Then they moved him to a hard labor camp. And he died at the labor camp.
Wow.
He had been offered a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music in London, but Jewish emigration was stopped, so he couldn't go.
Right.
And he kept composing while he was in Terezin. And when he was moved to Auschwitz, he gave all of his scores to his girlfriend. And she, at the end of the war, she survived, and at the end of the war gave all the scores to his sister.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, quite a story.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about this piece and if it has any kind of relationships to other composers?
Yeah. You know, it said, when I was reading about him, it said how he was influenced by Berg and Weber and Schoenberg. So I said, okay.
Interesting.
Actually, I hear Bartok.
Interesting.
A lot more. The second movement has that Hungarian first syllable accent. La-ba, la-da, la-ba, ha-ha, ha-ha, ra-ba. It's something. And the last movement, my goodness, the last movement sounds like the divertimento to me. The Bartok divertimento. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So it's imagine, he was 25 when he died. Almost 1/3 of my life.
And having survived 3 elements
Yes.
of this torture.
Yeah.
And created.
Yes. Remarkable. And so that camp in Terezin was loaded with talent. Loaded. And he was one of them.
Wow, incredible.
Yep.
Amazing. Our next piece on the concert is the Barber Violin Concerto, which is a bear for everyone.
You want to hear about pushback, huh?
I would love to hear.
This is, okay, so now for everyone else, I'm going to be talking about Curtis a lot.
Okay.
And that's the Curtis Institute of Music, okay?
Philadelphia.
Very famous school in Philadelphia. And Barber and this certain violinist, Brizelli, were students there at the same time.
Okay.
Okay? And a wealthy industrialist had Brizelli in his, what they say, ward. So he was a sponsor of him, okay?
Sure.
And after graduation, Brizelli went to New York and studied with a guy named Meif. And Barber went to Europe to study. World War II came out. Barber made his way back via Paris on a boat, thank goodness. Well, this industrialist went to Barber and said, I'd like to commission you to write a concerto for Brizelli, and he's going to make his New York debut. Okay? Barber said, sure. So he got the first two movements, and everything blew up. The violinist didn't like it. His teacher didn't like it. He said, what did he say? It's not noble enough.
Interesting.
It's not, there's no big orchestral introduction.
Sure.
The soloist starts on the very first note of the piece. And he said, it's just not virtuosic enough. Do something else.
Wow.
And Barber said, no, I like it. I'm going to leave that. And then finally, he wrote the third movement, the perpetual motion, as if the piece wasn't difficult enough.
Absolutely.
And then with this thing. Meif went to the industrialist and said, pull the plug. This is not going to work. All right? It's no good. It's bad.
Wow.
Forget it. And we're not doing it. And then that Brizelli did the Dvorak Concerto instead in New York.
Interesting.
Okay? So Barber didn't flinch, and by now he was teaching at Curtis. Okay? So he's there. Fritz Reiner of the Pittsburgh Symphony and Chicago Symphony was conducting the student orchestra. Barber just thought, So he got some kid at Curtis to learn the concerto, and they put on a performance with Reiner conducting. In the audience was Eugene Ormandy, who happened to be 44 years music director of the Philly Orchestra. And he immediately got Albert Spalding, British fiddle player, to learn the concerto, and he programmed it for 2 concerts at the Academy of Music the next year, and brought it to New York for Carnegie.
Wow.
And now that piece, everybody knows it, everybody plays it. We know how that turned out.
Yep.
So Mr. Meif, Mr. Brizelli, you missed.
You missed. Ormandy knew.
Ormandy got it, and then it took off.
Wow.
And it's so remarkable how romantic and beautiful that first movement, and the second movement reminds me of the Brahms Concerto.
Yes.
Starting with that
Oboe
oboe solo, and just, you know,
Yeah.
time stops, and then the fiddle comes in. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Heavenly.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And then the third movement.
yeah. Just nonstop.
Insanity.
Yes, yeah. Good luck. I'm not there anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Been practicing my triplets.
there you go. Nah, it's a beautiful piece.
It really is.
Beautiful. And I love the story, and I love the fact that Barber didn't give in.
He knew what he had.
He knew this is my thing. You don't have to like it, but I'm not changing it. Okay? Bye-bye.
And it's so unique to the violin repertoire. It's different. It's something extra.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It straddles old, romantic, and forward. And just to think that he got the students at Curtis to do this, and Ormandy heard it, and then boom, it took off. You know, that's it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need the gold stamp from somebody outside of the sphere to say this is it. Many people will follow.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Fabulous, fabulous. So I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting performance for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Energy and passion and all those wonderful things.
Yeah.
And then the concert wraps up with Beethoven 3.
The Eroica.
Eroica. Tell us a little bit about the name.
Okay.
How did it get labeled Eroica?
I'm going to quote Berlioz here.
Okay.
Okay. Wait a sec. I need these. It is a serious mistake to truncate the title which the composer provided for the symphony. The real title is, it reads, Heroic Symphony to commemorate the memory of a great man. As will be seen, the subject here is not battles or triumphal marches, but rather deep and serious thoughts, melancholy memories, ceremonies of imposing grandeur and sadness, in short, a funeral oration for a hero. Wow. I know few examples in music of a style where sorrow has been so unfailingly conveyed in forms of such purity and such nobility of expression.
Wow.
That's Berlioz in The Art of Music and Other Essays.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, pushback. Beethoven said to Krumholz, the composer of dubious merits, blessings on him, he said, I'm starting a new style of composition. There's James Hillman, who was a Jungian student, Carl Jung, wrote a beautiful book called The Soul's Code. And he says in there that each of us is born with a seed, with a genius, with a daemon, and that we carry that through our life. It's there, it's somewhere within us. And therefore, you have to look not at the beginning, oh, this made this and this. He said, you get to the end to see where someone ended up, and then look back and say, this fit? Of course that didn't fit. That,
sure.
Too small. So, Beethoven, if one looks at his late string quartets or his late piano sonatas, you see where he went. I mean, he was
way out there.
Cosmic.
Yeah.
This is cosmic writing.
Yes.
Huge.
Yeah.
Enormous. Time stops. It goes up. It's just unbelievable. Of course, the classical style that Haydn and Mozart did so beautifully with was too small for him. And the interesting thing is that the great Guarneri String Quartet recorded all the quartets 3 times.
Wow.
And Arnold Steinhardt, first finalist, told me that they did it the same way each time. They started with the middle, then they did the late, and only after all of that would they tackle the early, opus 18s. The earlier the opus of Beethoven, the more awkward it is to play. It's really hard. And this Eroica was originally dedicated to Napoleon, who, instead of living the principles of the French Revolution, appointed himself emperor.
Sure.
Nice, huh? Good. And Beethoven was disgusted, and he went and he ripped out the page, tore it up, threw it out, and spit on it, and then he made this heroic thing. Now, at this period of Beethoven's life, and forgive my German, but Heiligenstadt Testament, he was enormously depressed and contemplating suicide. He was going deaf. It was getting worse and worse. And he fought through all of that and came forth. Now, at the premiere of the Eroica, which in Latin, Spanish, and Italian means heroic. Okay? I mean, you type it in and just bing, bing, heroic.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, the first performance of the Eroica, Haydn was in the audience.
Wow.
Get this.
That's cool.
You know, well, wait till you hear what I'm saying. It's way too long, way too loud, bombastic. It's never going to be popular with the public.
Well,
We know how that ended up.
exactly.
So this is Beethoven at his beginning of his middle period, and he's reaching out.
He's stretching.
Get out of the way. The elbows and the knees trying to be small.
Sure.
He's starting to go big, and you know that piece is so great for the whole orchestra. There's not a dead note or section in it. Excuse me. I remember in high school when I did it for the first time, the oboist St. Paul Chamber Orchestra had just gotten a new principal oboe, Richard Kilmer, who ended up at Easton. So my good friend was playing lead in the orchestra, and Kilmer came up to him and said, "So, how do you like the Beethoven E-flat oboe concerto?" And the oboe part is incredible. I played the first violin part. I played the second violin part. I love it. In the middle of the funeral march of the second movement, the fugue, which starts with the second violins. It's an F natural, I remember.
Yep.
It's just the whole orchestra, the horns, everybody has something to do.
That's right.
And, you know, Haydn missed.
It was just too new.
They were a little too new.
Yeah.
Just what would you have thought of the ninth?
Yeah, exactly.
What are these singers? Get out of here. What? Come on. So Beethoven was so remarkable. And I encourage anybody who's really interested. There's this book, Beethoven, Letters, Journals, and Conversations, edited, translated, and introduced by Michael Hamburger. And this book has all of those things in it, and it's just fascinating to get a picture of Beethoven. And we now know, and I found an old article that I saved in this book, he died of lead poisoning.
Right.
You know, and lead poisoning leads to deafness. And his health was terrible. His inner organs were a disaster. The liver was half the size it should be. The spleen was black and stiff. He had kidney stones. It was in enormous pain. And all of this from the locks of his hair that somebody clipped off while he was in the casket. A student.
Incredible.
And a friend of Mendelssohn and Schumann and Berlioz. And this went down the family, down the lines. And then two guys in the US got a hold of some of it, and they sent it, and they had these tests, and it was 42 times the amount of lead in the hair that is considered safe.
Wow.
And so his temper, he had a temperament, right? Okay.
Sure.
So he was born with that.
Sure.
Okay, but the other, the other thing of feeding it this ill health, and how he still, when you read those letters and things in there, I mean, his search for the center of the universe, and his tenderness, it's incredible.
Absolutely.
God.
And the joy that exudes from the ninth, if you can imagine the pain he must have been in at that same time.
Right.
It's incredible.
And the pain that he had, even psychologically, with the ear horn and telling people, "Speak up! I can't hear you. Would you look louder?"
Yeah.
And he was humiliated.
Sure.
And he's saying, why me? I'm supposed to have this better than everybody else.
That's right.
And it's getting worse. It's worse. But then he would walk in the forest. He would walk in nature. And his symphonies, starting with 3, big, bold, 4, smaller, 5, 6, the pastoral, 7, 8, smaller, and then 9, And when you look at the fact that Haydn and Mozart composed so many symphonies, triple digits for Haydn, 41 I think for Wolfi.
Yeah.
And then Beethoven came with the ninth, and they called it the curse of the ninth.
That's right.
Because
He started something.
he started something. Everyone went, what can I
right.
do? So this is the beginning of Beethoven. This Eroica is the beginning of Beethoven really becoming himself.
Starting to show.
Yeah, and he what do you say, embraced his illness. He's going deaf, everything, but he stuck. He stuck with it. And he said something beautiful, that he couldn't take his life because he couldn't leave before he said everything that he needed to say.
Beautiful.
Incredible.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And so he died at, 55, 56 years old. One of the last things, Schubert knew, he was down the street and he heard that Beethoven was dying. And he was a young guy, young composer. He didn't, what am I going to, how do I do this? And he knocked on the door. Somebody came and he said, if it's possible, could you just show some of my scores to the maestro, please? So, oh, all right, but he's not. Beethoven was dying in bed and reading Schubert's scores. Here's another thing he said. I weep every time I say it. He said, Schubert, now there's somebody who's touched by the fire of genius.
Wow.
So this is,
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's right.
That's the character of Beethoven. And then, things were gas on the fire with lead poisoning and that kind of thing. And so.
Yeah, but such a rich soul.
Yes, huge, enormous.
Leading by the soul.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. Buckle your seatbelts.
Okay.
We're going to have an incredible concert. Thanks so much, Victor.
You're welcome.
Really
Thank you
appreciate it.
Thank you for doing the dialogue with me.
My pleasure. It's so much fun. Awesome.